Chapter 1. The Call of the Wild. Elsa stood at the edge of her front yard, her eyes fixed on the vast, shadowy expanse of the forest that stretched beyond her family's property. The dense trees swayed gently in the breeze, whispering secrets that only she could hear. It was a place of mystery and adventure, and she felt its call every day. Living just outside of town had its perks. The hustle and bustle of city life were distant murmurs replaced by the soothing sounds of nature. For Elsa, this proximity to the wild was both a gift and a temptation. She often dreamt of what lay beyond the familiar paths she had already explored. Today was no different. As the school bus dropped her off at the end of the long, winding driveway, her thoughts were already miles away, deep within the forest. She waved goodbye to the driver, her mind buzzing with excitement about the afternoon ahead. Elsa hurried into the house, greeting her mother with a quick hello before dashing up the stairs to her room. She flung open the door to her sanctuary, a small space filled with maps, nature books, and a collection of treasures she had found during her previous excursions. Her backpack lay in the corner, ready to be packed. She began gathering her provisions with practiced efficiency. A flashlight, a small first aid kit, her compass, and her favorite book, a well-worn copy of The Adventures of Robin Hood. She added a water bottle and the sandwiches her mother had made for her lunch, wrapping them carefully to ensure they stayed fresh. She smiled to herself, imagining the taste of the peanut butter and jelly as she sat on a fallen log, surrounded by the forest sounds. With her backpack packed, Elsa headed downstairs. Her mother glanced up from the kitchen table, where she was sorting through a pile of mail. "Heading out to the woods again, Elsa?" she asked, a hint of concern in her voice. "Just for a little while, Mom," Elsa replied, trying to sound casual. "I'll stay close to the house." Her mother nodded, though the worry didn't completely leave her eyes. "Be careful, and don't stay out too late. Dinner will be ready by 6. "I will," Elsa promised, giving her mother a quick hug before darting out the back door. The afternoon sun was warm on her face as she made her way across the yard. She passed the garden where her father was busy weeding. He looked up and gave her a wave, which she returned with a grin. Reaching the edge of the property, she paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the forest before her. The trees seemed to welcome her as she stepped into their shade. The air was cooler here, filled with the earthy scent of moss and leaves. Birds chattered overhead, and somewhere in the distance, she heard the faint trickle of a stream. Elsa followed a narrow path she had walked many times before, but today she felt a pull to go further to see what lay beyond her usual haunts. As she walked, the familiar sounds and sights of the forest enveloped her. She marveled at the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy, casting intricate patterns on the ground. She paused occasionally to examine an interesting rock or a particularly vibrant patch of wildflowers, adding a few choice specimens to her backpack. Time seemed to slip away as she ventured deeper into the woods. The trees grew taller and denser, their branches intertwining overhead to create a natural cathedral. Elsa's steps slowed as she absorbed the beauty around her. She felt a thrill of adventure tingling in her fingertips, urging her onward. The path she followed became less distinct, eventually fading into the underbrush. Elsa didn't mind. She liked the challenge of forging her own way. She checked her compass, noting the direction she was heading, and pressed on. The forest seemed to close in around her, the sounds of the outside world disappearing entirely. Lost in her thoughts and the beauty of her surroundings, Elsa didn't notice the gradual shift in the light. The sun, now dipping toward the horizon, cast long shadows that crept across the forest floor. She suddenly realized how far she had come and how late it was getting. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind, and she decided it was time to head back. Turning around, Elsa retraced her steps as best she could. The forest, which had seemed so welcoming earlier, now felt different. The trees loomed larger, and the shadows seemed to move in strange ways. She quickened her pace, trying to remember the landmarks she had passed. But as the light continued to fade, everything began to look unfamiliar. Panic started to nibble at the edges of her mind. She took out her compass again, hoping it would guide her back. To her dismay, the needle spun wildly, refusing to settle on a direction. She shook it, tapping it against her hand, but it remained erratic. Elsa's heart pounded as she realized she was lost. She tried to stay calm, remembering the survival tips she had read in her books. Find a clearing, stay put, and wait for help. She walked until she found a small open area and sat down on a fallen log, wrapping her arms around her knees. The forest was growing darker by the minute, and the nocturnal sounds began to rise. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a coyote. Elsa felt a lump form in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't afford to panic. She took a deep breath and focused on the sounds around her, trying to find comfort in their familiarity. She knew her parents would start looking for her when she didn't come home for dinner. She just had to wait. As the stars began to twinkle through the gaps in the canopy, Elsa wrapped herself in her jacket and leaned back against the log. She closed her eyes, letting the gentle sounds of the forest lull her into a light, uneasy sleep.